I hate buyer personas, which is weird because I love fiction. If buyer personas were more like space wizards, I might be more into them. But in general, buyer personas read like the most boring comic book ever. I want Saga. I want Y the Last Man. I don't want Tommy Technology. On the other hand, I love brand archetypes because I love fiction. They make your brand identity spicy, and as a marketer, they give us a lot to play with. But just like buyer personas, their application can be just as problematic. And both boil down to one thing: bias. Today I'm going to share why I think these frameworks are broken and show you a new exercise to help make archetypes more useful and more customer-centric. And I'm going to share some examples of 3 recent campaigns from Indeed, Apple, and SkyScanner that have nailed the nuance. I'm Kevin Shively, and welcome to episode 204 of Play It Back. Buyer personas and brand archetypes. Let's start with definitions. Buyer personas are fictitious characters used to represent a real target audience. Susan from finance likes cats and reads Forbes articles in a ranch-style house and has a bachelor's degree from UNC and blah, 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 blah. The goal of buyer personas is to give you insight into who your target customer is and what makes them tick. More on how they're broken in a minute. Brand archetypes, on the other hand, are the human character traits that most accurately reflect a brand. They're meant to give directional insight into how your brand shows up and the emotional draw that comes from that. The concept of archetypes is rooted in psychology. Carl Jung talked about a set of personality archetypes that people are born with. Later on, Joseph Campbell, who's credited with coining the monomyth or the hero's journey, which I talked about in season 1, defined a set of character archetypes that show up in every story. Then in 2001, author Carol S. Pearson and brand strategist Margaret Mark defined 12 brand archetypes in their book, The Hero and the Outlaw, building extraordinary brands through the power of archetypes. Those archetypes are the outlaw, the creator, the magician, the hero,
the lover, the jester, the everyman, the caregiver, the ruler, the innocent, the sage, and the explorer.
In theory, both brand archetypes and buyer personas are super useful, but here's the part where I tell you we've been using them wrong. Let's start with buyer personas. I hate them. I've always hated them, and I think you should throw them out. Before you freak out, I'm not advocating that you get rid of your ICP or your ideal customer profile. There are certain intangibles that we know about our buyers which signal that they're ready to buy, and you need to use those signals. We need to get closer to our customers. I understand that. What I'm advocating for is getting rid of this fiction. In most cases, the additional color around imaginary family life and education and interests and income and race and gender, etc., is all just a waste of time. What I'm advocating against is the fictionalized prescriptive character that you use to define everything your team does. These personas can be toxic to the business. For one thing, they're based in bias. They're all assumptive, even if they're backed by data. If I've decided that my buyer is a lookalike of Bob from Ohio, who has 2.5 kids and a dog, and his wife Susan is the president of the PTA, I'm ignoring anyone else who might be a potential buyer. I'm ignoring anyone who doesn't look like Bob. This can and has led to unintentional racism, sexism, ageism, you name it. It makes your product or service less inclusive if you're only sliding into Bob's DMs. And it limits your team if you tell them that it's the box they need to stay in. Secondly, buyer personas are just boring. This isn't a real person. How am I going to inspire my team with Bob from Ohio? By the way, sorry to any Bobs from Ohio that may be watching this. I don't know why I'm coming after you, but we love you here too. And there are similar reasons we get brand archetypes wrong. It becomes this internal navel-gazing exercise. Who do we want to be? What do we stand for? Now, this is very important work as you define your mission, your vision, and your values, but that's your business plan. Not your branding. That's a precursor to branding. Your brand is the connective tissue between that mission, between that vision to your customer. Your brand archetypes, when used how most of us use them, don't make that connection. Brand archetypes way too often are used as a lens to look in the wrong direction. You're talking about how you want your customer to see you, not themselves. It's natural, so it has to be an intentional change to your thinking, because here's a secret. Your customers don't care about your story. Not as much as they care about their own. The best brands in the world reflect this. Nike's archetype is the hero because they focus on why their customers are heroes. Everyone is an athlete. Apple is the poster child for the creator archetype because that's what their customers do with their product. Hell, I'm doing it right now. But the brand archetype exercises that you'll find in the consultants that you work with don't set you up for success here. The problem with the way many of us use brand archetypes is something called the false consensus effect. It's a cognitive bias that makes us overestimate how much we think others are like us. We assume that their beliefs, their values, their characteristics, their experiences, their behaviors all mirror ours. When we focus on our brand archetypes, it's human nature to say, this is what we want. It must be what our customers want. So you gotta reframe the exercise. One of the things that I do love about brand archetypes is that they focus on these universal emotional drivers. And because they're rooted in psychology about human people, we can apply them to buyers. And that's what I want you to do. So let's look at this in 3 parts that connect your buyers to the brand. On one side, we've got buyer archetypes. What are the universal emotional characteristics that your buyers exhibit? And this should be flexible because your buyers aren't all the same. And these archetypes shouldn't reflect who they are today or even who they think they are. It should reflect who they want to be. Every one of our customers is on their own journey, trying to grow, trying to learn, trying to get better, richer, happier, etc. The archetype should reflect their aspiration. And on the other side, you've got your brand archetype. This is who you want to be for those buyers. This is a reflection of your mission, of your vision, of your values. If your vision is to disrupt a certain way of doing things, how does that show up as it pertains to that buyer? Now here's where that gets fun. In between these two, how do we match communication styles? I talk to my wife differently than I talk to colleagues, than I talk to my best friend, than I talk to strangers in a grocery store. Everyone is different, and it's not necessarily authentic to show up the same way. If you talk to everyone the same, that's not authenticity. It's stubborn and it's lazy. You're saying that your identity is more important than their needs. And as a brand, it shouldn't be. When you clearly define each of these 3 categories, you get the foundation for not just your brand identity, but how to make that identity relevant to your buyers, all of your buyers. So let's take a look at a few examples and how they've captured the buyer archetype in a way that's aspirational, inclusive, and puts the customer at the center of the story. First up is Indeed. The recruitment platform just launched their The World Can Work Better campaign with agency 72 and Sunny. Cleona Hayes, director of global brand and advertising for Indeed, told Adweek, everybody is looking for their definition of better work. The old ways of working aren't something that fits for people anymore. People want more transparency, more flexibility, and more opportunity. The campaign, which launched in the US and European markets, show a variety of reasons that people would wind up visiting Indeed and tap into some of those universal realities of remote work, apathetic bosses, flexibility, and growth. Indeed is a tool. It's a resource. The hero in each of their ads are the people. But I'd argue that the archetypes of those people aren't always the same either, because neither are Indeed's customers. Hell, neither am I as a single person. We contain multitudes, you guys. Sometimes I'm an explorer, sometimes I'm a caregiver, sometimes I'm an outlaw. My outlaw name is Rock Tender, because obviously I like to rock, but I've also got a soft side. Indeed's campaign captures this nuance. Take this ad, The Standoff, for instance.
Amanda?
Oh, hi, Amanda. Come on in. Nice to finally meet you.
Thanks so much for inviting me in.
Come take a seat.
Indeed might present as the sage. They're providing knowledge. Sages don't look to change the world themselves, but prefer to empower others to do so by seeking out valuable information and sharing it. But that's not the customer story here. She's an outlaw. She's breaking the rules of the traditional interview and challenging that status quo. And she's challenging it because of Indeed. The story is about a black woman interviewing at a law firm with pictures of old white men in dark wood-paneled offices. One of the old white men even winks at her as if to say, we're in control here. But she's got an ace up her sleeve. She's a rebel because she has Indeed. It's aspirational, right? She's scared, but she wants things to change. She doesn't want that dependence on the old way. Who's felt that way while interviewing before? I would imagine all of us. So Indeed can still be the sage. When you visit their LinkedIn page, that's how they show up. When they show the app in the ad even, That's the vibe. Wisdom and tips and guidance. But in the ad, they're appealing to our inner outlaw. You can hear this in the Old West showdown style music, the confident smile and tone that the hero develops as she walks into the office, and even the copy on screen. Pay gap, meet pay transparency. Old guard, pew, 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 meet the rebel. I play by my own rules because I have access to the sage. The language, communication, and style of the ad reflect the relationship, not just who their brand archetype is, and not just who the buyer is. The three main tone of voice characteristics of the rebel: they're disruptive, they're rebellious, and they're combative. The three tone of voice characteristics of the sage: they're knowledgeable, they're assured, and they're guiding. You can see each of these show up in the ad and very carefully map to one another. She's disruptive and combative, intense close-up on her eyes. Indeed is assured and knowledgeable, deep breath after she looks at the app. They focus more on what her relationship is to that sage as an outlaw than they do on the fact that they're the sage. Now let's move on to Apple. Now, Apple, as I mentioned, is the poster child for the creator archetype. Pretty much any mention of brand archetypes references them in association with the creator. But Apple needs to appeal to everyone. They sell us all their stuff, not just creators. So in this ad, they appeal to the caregiver, and the caregiver in all of us. It's an ad about a three-legged dog getting a prosthetic and just being able to run through a field for the first. I can't. Just cut to that.
I met Trip when he was 4 months old, and the first time I saw him, I fell in love with him. He was brought to the veterinary hospital to consider euthanasia due to his deformities.
The process to build a pet prosthetic starts with the full body scan. We use the LiDAR scanner and TrueDepth camera on the iPhone to scan and build 3D models of the pets that we work with.
He sees himself as a regular dog. He just loves life.
They're still representing as a creator brand. It's part of their Shot on iPhone campaign, so all of the footage is shot on iPhones, and they highlight the tech used to scan a dog using an iPhone. But the appeal is emotionally geared to the caregiver. It's an association play. Apple loves three-legged dogs. You're really gonna buy a Samsung? Okay. So what's the communication connection? The main brand voice characteristics of a creator brand: inspirational, daring, provocative. I don't know if I'd necessarily call this spot provocative, although it provoked some serious emotions in me. But inspirational and daring, for sure. It's trying something new. And for the caregiver, caring, warm, and reassuring. They hit all the notes. The tool, your iPhone, and the tech it enables is daring and inspirational. The hero of the story is caring and warm and reassuring, and is able to do so successfully because of their iPhone. And finally, SkyScanner, the Expedia and booking competitor. SkyScanner has a campaign running called The Ultimate Travel Hack, and I love this campaign because it takes what we've been talking about and makes it literal. It's composed of 4 mini campaigns led by characters representing different parts of their customer base. Number 1, the magician. Number 2, the everyman. Number 3, the explorer. And number 4, the outlaw. SkyScanner has modeled their brands after Liquid Death, KFC, and Domino's to tackle a lot of different demographics using humor. They're the Joker, but they're connecting with those other 4 personas through that connecting language. The Joker is fun-loving, it's playful, it's optimistic, but they're speaking to the magician by also bringing in some mysticism and being well-informed. The everyman is friendly and humble, the explorer is exciting and fearless, and the outlaw is disruptive.
Is this your card? Ooh, what sorcery is this?
I was never very good at traditional magic.
What's that?
But I found my niche as the world's first travel magician.
The best flights to amazing places.
I see the strings. That's not real.
Is this your deal?
What inspires my travel magic? SkyScanner.
It's the easiest way to see the best deals
All in one place.
Anyone can cut people in half, but travel magic can cut prices in half.
believe your eyes!
By connecting brand archetypes and buyer archetypes, we're able to limit some bias whenever we can. We're also able to create messaging that resonates at an emotional level and capture aspiration in a way that a buyer persona just can't. Indeed, SkyScanner and Apple are doing a great job of this. And if they focus solely on their core buyer persona or the inward-looking archetype, these are stories that they would never tell. Buyer archetype, brand archetype, communication match. Meet in the middle. Tell their story, powered by your story. Remember that your brand archetype isn't a rigid decision that means you have to talk like a robot and show up exactly the same way every time. The framework was meant to make brands feel more relatable. And the buyer persona, to its credit, was meant to help us understand our buyers. The goal is to eliminate some of that bias and make sure we're speaking to an audience in a relatable, exciting, and authentic way. And what's more relatable than showing up in the best way to authentically connect with different groups? We'll see you next week.